For this last exercise, I'm going to pull up that Chapter 2 worksheet that we did in 2 dimensions before, and you can use any Chapter 2 worksheet you want. So this has my title block set up and also the 3 views in 3D. And I went ahead and added some coordinates over here. What I did was I moved my coordinate system over to line up with each of these blocks. And if you type in dim style, this will allow you to modify the number of significant figures that you're showing. I think it defaults to like 3 significant figures, and you can also bump the text size up if you want. And here's the arrow size. So I'll go ahead and set that current. And I'm going to say there's dim linear, dim angular. I'm going to say dim ordinate. So with my snap settings on, I'm then going to go ahead and just grab some of these features. And this is where you'll find out if you had everything dimensioned right. So you might be redrawing a few things if these did not get in here. So just remind yourself of the dimensions of whatever worksheet you did out of the book. And looking at these, I think probably this top view is going to be the easiest view for me to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new drawing, and I'm making sure to grab my title block that I created before, because I'm going to use ViewBASE and we're going to pull some things into our title block here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this top view. So I'm selecting the whole thing, right click, and I'm going to copy this with a base point onto my clipboard. And I will pull this into drawing number 1 with just a Control V. So here I've got my base point, and I'm going to put this in 0.00. Okay, so that just gives me a starting point there. For the outer rectangle, I'll go ahead and start there. So just a 10 by 10 rectangle. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude that first. And I will actually extrude it down. So if you remember the dimensions, it was 1.75 high. And I'm going to go ahead and send that down negative 1.75. And that'll be just the floor of my object there. Coming back over here to remind myself of dimension, so I have kind of a wedge at the edge that goes up 3.25. And if you remember how to draw these wedges, I'm going to click 1, 2, and that first area that I click, that's the side that the wedge is going to pull up on. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm clicking on the side I want to be high, and then on 2, and I want it to go up 3.25. So there's quite a few different ways that I can do that, but using that wedge command, that's a great way. Next, I'm going to copy this. So select, and I'm grabbing a base point that's going to allow me to snap it in place on the other side. So really think about the best place to grab that base point. So there's our two wedges, and going back and forth to check some dimensions. So let's see, we'll have another rectangle that goes up to 8.75. Or if we want to remember, see how that, so this will be a height of 7 if we make an extrusion here. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to grab this rectangle and I'm going to extrude it up to a height of 7. And let's see, this is another wedge on the top. So this top wedge goes, let's just be linear again. So we're going from 8.75 up to 10, or a height of 1.25. So come on over here. And for this one, yeah, this would be quite difficult to create without the wedge. So I'm going to click on the side I want to be high, click on the low side, 1.25. There's one wedge, and let's see. So I've got this rectangle on the floor. Now this is not a closed surface, so I'm going to go ahead and make another rectangle here on top so that I'm sure to have a closed surface. And we'll go ahead and pull that up to this 5.5 mark. So again, I want to see this dimension from the floor. That's going to be 3.75. Okay, so we'll say extrude this guy, enter 3.75. And in front is one more wedge. So this is really good practice at making wedges over here. So again, snap, snap, and up. Okay, one last thing. These are all as separate pieces on here. So I'm going to go ahead and use that union command to get this all into one piece. And at the very end, I'm actually going to just get rid of that drawing now that I have my three-dimensional object. So come back over here to my realistic view, and it looks like we have our shape. Okay, so one more step for these Chapter 2 worksheets, and that is to come over to one of these title blocks that you have, and you can go ahead and update the information. So put in the current date, and you can update the chapter on here. So this is Chapter 2. I think it was Exercise 1. And we will mess around with the scale after we see what scale it is. So the grand finale command is called ViewBASE. And we're going to grab something out of our model space. You might have to wait a little bit the first time you pull this command up because it's looking around in its model space. And you see it's grabbed here, the side view. Now before I left click on this, I can change the orientation, I can change the size of it. I can do that now, or I can do that later. So I'll show you how to edit that later too. So I'm going to go ahead and move this into kind of a nice spot and left click it down, then click enter, and I'm going to left click, left click, left click, right click, enter. Okay, so we got this in fairly good shape. If you click on it, it's all kind of connected to this lower left-hand view, and you actually can click on this blue box and drag it around, reposition it if you would like. For anything that has the wrong scale, you can right-click on it. There's properties and quick properties. Quick properties will allow you to change the scale. So for this case, rather than setting the scale for what this one is, we can change this around to be really teeny here, or I think it put it down to 1 to 4. So we'll try 1 to 5 instead. And that will just give us a little bit more room up here so that we're not off the printing page. And you want to give yourself lots of room for dimensions. For all of these, you can right click and pick up that properties. You see here the standard scale is 1 to 4. So that is something that we can update our title block with, make sure it's showing the right scale. And that is the end of it. So come over here to Model Space, create your three-dimensional model, and this front side, right side, and the top side, that will correspond when you're using ViewBASE to what is going to be put on the front. You can rotate this around if needed, or you can change that orientation as you're putting it on here. So play around with some 3D rotate, 3D move if you need to, but see if you can get one of those Chapter 2 worksheets as a three-dimensional object and pulled over onto your title block using the ViewBASE command.